Richard. And thank you guys so much for joining us this afternoon. We've got three incredible Coraggio members that are going to speak to us about different aspects of HR, flexible work arrangements, and of course, more about COVID vaccination. So each presenter will go for about 10 minutes or so. At the end of those three presentations, we'll have some Q&A, and as Richard said, we'll stay for some networking. And I think I need to speak to Philip about my international taxes, but more on that later. With regards to our first presentation, we have Sylvia Lee, who is the Managing Director of Astrum Recruitment. She's going to speak to us about flexible working arrangements. So Sylvia has 16 years of experience working with niche and global recruitment companies in various management positions. She established Astrum Recruitment about 10 years ago to continue her passion for growing and achieving business success through acquiring and engaging high-performing talent. Sylvia has been a member of Coraggio for just over 6 years. Over to you, Sylvia.
Thank you, Wendy. Thank you also, Richard, for giving me the opportunity to present this afternoon. I really appreciate that. Let me just bring up the slide presentation, which hopefully you will all be able to see now. Can everyone see that? Wonderful. Let's hope my driving skills are good so that we can navigate through this. So managing remote teams. There's a range of challenges that come with that. Firstly, if you look at, just find my navigation here. If we look at the screen, the first cover sheet here, I'm going to run through a series of slides. We can see that it is very possible to work remotely, but at the moment, we're in a very different situation with the pandemic and working through that journey. And at the moment, it looks a bit more like this. People are stressed, they're fearful, they're lonely, and finding it very difficult to work remotely. So that places even more pressure on managers to lead teams through this journey. This slide here will talks a little more about working from home and what to consider. So let's start with workstations and assessing the viability of having your staff work from home. Firstly, I recommend that you look at the job role that each of your team members need to perform and whether it's possible to do that working from home. Look at the outcomes and do they need to be changed in some way? Is working from home going to impact the results that you're expecting from your team members? Look at equipment and what they'll be needing to be successful in their jobs whilst they work from home. Things like phones, headsets, laptops, and safe working environment are important. Even the desk and chair that your staff sit on need to be vetted by you so that you're comfortable with the way they're working from home to make sure that you eliminate any risk of injury. Start discussing with your staff as well. Talk to them about what the challenges are so that you're fully aware of any other issues relating to them actually working from home. So things like children and partners, noise, possible domestic violence are important factors that we need to consider as employers when we expect our staff to work from home. And also request that your staff provide you with a photo of their office environment so that you can see that it has been set up the right way and you're comfortable that they have everything that they need. I would also recommend that you document what you've given your staff so that it's all returned if for some reason they leave the job, and you can manage all the technology that has actually been sent out to somebody's home for them to do the job. Consider cybersecurity. Now, this is an interesting situation because in a typical office arrangement, we would have facilities to shred documentation and make sure that everything, all material is kept confidential. So put some policy around that and collaborate and agree on activities and outcomes and establish weekly and monthly goals. How to manage flexible and remote teams. We're now talking about how to actually manage people whilst they're working remotely. Good communication is definitely an important factor and key to success. I'll run through some of the bullet points here, and understanding what motivates your staff is very important. Being empathetic, listening to them and advising them as we set out on this journey, and as we especially during the COVID situation, making sure that they're aware of what that journey looks like, how that will affect them, and what the different phases are in that journey to make them feel more comfortable in where they're actually heading and the outcome. Collaborate with your staff and agree on outcomes and achievements. The more involved your staff are, the more comfortable they'll feel about where they're heading and what is expected from them. Daily, weekly and monthly goals, results and outcomes can be tracked. And when you communicate that to your staff, they'll all feel quite involved in making sure that this is done and providing you with regular feedback and updates. And agree those goals, agree what those goals are and link them back to the activity and the actual goals that you're wanting to achieve each week and each month, so that they're fully aware and that it's very transparent and no surprises as to what they actually need to be achieving whilst they're working from home. Activity and success reports. Now, I recommend that you do this daily and weekly. It'll vary from job role to job role, but being able to understand and feel that you can trust your staff and understand what it is that they're doing each day is really critical. And give them some, empower them by giving them the opportunity to actually treat that report as a success report rather than a KPI report. They'll be much more motivated and engaged in delivering that to you, and more enthusiastic about achieving milestones and results each day. More phone and less Zoom. I mean, more phone and Zoom and less email, is what I was trying to say, is so critical. I'm seeing a lot of managers relying on email to communicate with their staff, and it's not always the best way. So I suggest that you talk to your staff over the phone and actually physically see them over Zoom, and communicate with them on a regular basis and organise team huddles. So it's not just one-on-ones, but it's also team meetings. And celebrate the wins and achievements, no matter how small or large those achievements are. Working from home tips and tricks. This is always a challenging one, especially when everything we do now is being done at home. Show up for work is one of my first tips. Make sure that you're dressed for work. Routine is key to keep you from falling into a bit of a slump. A disciplined approach is important, managing your time like money. Manage distractions and make sure you have a quiet space, and trying to reduce multitasking as well. Interruptions can be quite costly. Establishing a work and family plan certainly helps to reduce interruptions, and everyone is then on the same page as to when you have time for them, when you can help with homeschooling, and when you need that quiet time to focus on work. And blocking out your time, it might just be an hour at a time before you jump into half an hour of homeschooling, but it just helps limit distractions. Looking after yourself is another big tip for working from home, making sure that you eat well, you sleep well, and you're still socializing and connecting with family and friends. And doing physical activity to get you away from the desk, keep you feeling well and energized, such as yoga, walking, step challenges, anything at all that keeps your body moving. We're now moving on to virtual team building meetings and guidance. Motivation is the key to this. And I strongly suggest that people put on their leadership hat instead of their manager hat. Aim for high performing teams, even though we're not back at the office. Don't wait till we get back into the office. Start doing it now. Communicate, motivate, inspire, and coach. And share your vision and plan so that everyone's aware of what that journey looks like as you move from a challenge state to a reward state. Collaborate, be honest and genuine, and provide feedback and ideas, but also give your staff the opportunity to provide lots of feedback, help them be part of the challenge, solving the challenges, get them involved in actually solving challenges and being innovative to help bring businesses out of the current dilemma that we're in and getting them back on track. Share progress, results, wins with a dashboard. Training and development is critical. I strongly recommend that continue all the way because it helps people feel a lot better. Have fun with trivia, fitness challenges, and celebrating reward and recognition, anniversaries, birthdays. Any reason to bring people together. Recruiting and onboarding staff. Another important one, and we're asked this question a lot. Pre-recorded video interviews are a great way to be able to understand what people are really like in their home environment. They're a little more relaxed, they're not in front of a Zoom, and this is a good pre-assessment before you go into the recruitment or interview process. Zoom meetings and phone discussions are the best way forward for interviews, and bring other team members into those meetings as well, so that the candidates can feel comfortable about the type of environment they could potentially be moving into. Interview questions focus on strengths, working from home, and the structure. If you understand whether somebody's come from a highly structured environment versus one that may not be as structured, you can start to identify whether or not they're a good fit. Resilience and their demonstrated capability. So focus on that environment, whether they are resilient or not. Asking the right questions are important. Also around health and wellbeing needs, making sure that you're fully aware of what's required for this person to be successful in the role and working from home, and conducting background and reference checks. Onboarding new staff. First 2 weeks are critical. I suggest daily one-on-ones at the beginning of the day and at the end of the day. Providing a structured induction program is essential. Team introductions are important for building relationships, and technology is a very powerful tool now for connecting people and automating process. Training hour sessions should never be longer than about an hour so that people don't burn out. Provide them with webinars and tutorials as well, and always ask for feedback from your new hire to get any suggestions from them, but also understand what else and how else you can best support them in their new role. I've just got a diagram here about motivating staff, and some people might be a little surprised that 44% of what actually helps motivate employees is trust. 11% is based on incentives, and 21% is more control, and more transparency is sitting there as well in 24%. So it's interesting to see that the more we trust our employees, the more engaged they will be. And I've always been a strong believer that generally employees don't want to jeopardize their employer's trust. So I think if we show trust in what they can do for us as a business, they'll always go above and beyond. And just a little quote that I like to share with my staff: every day may not be good, but there is something good in every day. Thank you.
That was amazing, Sylvia. Thank you for that. I've written down some notes and all that, so I'll come back to you during the Q&A.
Sorry, I can go over time, so thank you.
Well, that's okay. I thought I would, Brad's the one that was really wanted the hook, so it's all right. So, which does bring me to Brad Adams, who is our second presenter. And Brad is the Director of HR Department, Lower North Shore. And he's going to speak on mental health and well-being. Brad has an extensive background in human resources, business management, and sales leadership. He holds an MBA with specialization in human resources and change management from Macquarie Graduate School of Management. He's led HR transformation across large enterprise and SME companies, and he brings a pragmatic approach to HR, helping guide SME businesses on balancing company objectives, risk and compliance. And Brad has just joined Coraggio back in May. So welcome, Brad.
Great. Wonderful to be here, and thank you very much for that introduction. So I don't have any slides today. I'm going to just talk through a few of the things that I see impacting health and well-being in the current environment. So for most of us, COVID-19 has really changed the way that we live and the way that we work for now, and likely well on into the future. People talk about the future of work. I think it's upon us now and came to us in a much greater rush than people expected. So our experiences in this environment, they differ for many reasons. It depends on where you live. Are you in lockdown or aren't you in lockdown? Are you in a designated hotspot or not? and some people are still under reasonably relaxed orders, particularly those of our friends in Queensland. And of course, it's the type of work that you do. Many white collar workers have just simply had to pick up their laptop and come on and work from home. But it's much harder to work from home if you're, say, a bricklayer. So we've got different people with different challenges about working from home or working in another environment. So whether your team is working remotely, we're all learning new ways to stay safe. In the workplace, we're juggling restrictions with work and care responsibilities. And we're also need to be mindful of our own mental health as individuals, but managers and business owners, but also for our employees that are facing some challenges that they haven't faced before. So how can we go about looking after our mental health and well-being in the workplace? So if you take a look at your looking after your team's mental health, in reality, this is equally or even more important than their physical safety at work. We're all trying to build new skills in ways that we can be resilient, in ways that we haven't had to before. We need to ensure that our team members know that it is actually okay to ask for help. Not only is it okay, but it's essential. And we've just come off Are You OK Day. More and much more front of mind at the moment in the current environment. New South Wales government's just run a survey, mental health in the workplace under COVID-19 restrictions, and they identified the 5 stresses that are most impacting workers that are working in a home environment at the moment. Number 1, as one would expect, it's a feeling of isolation. They're feeling stressed and under pressure to perform, overworked, given too much work. Interestingly, the next one below that was being underworked, and also being given boring work, work for the sake of doing work. A lot of those apply in a face-to-face work from the office environment, but they particularly were identified by this study as being a standout under these COVID signs. And unsurprisingly, the research also showed that mentally healthy workers are productive and present. So no surprises there in reality. Maintaining a healthy workplace and a positive environment where leaders and team members can actively promote and invest in mental health and well-being of themselves and their colleagues is a crucial element. So let's have a look at some of the things we can do. And look, I'll pick up on some of the themes from the presentation beforehand. We need to manage communication at work. Things change quickly, and it's important to communicate with your team on those changes as they come about. We need to be open and honest about the concerns that people have at the moment, whether they be about their work from home, whether it be about returning to work, or the work, in fact, that they're doing themselves at this point in time. Communication is going to help you address some of these issues. It's going to reduce conflict, reduce the stressors in the worker's life, and then help them adapt to the changes that are inevitable in this environment. Speaking of change, it can be uncomfortable, it can be uncertain. You need to remind your team that it's okay to feel off balance as these things are going on, and help them adapt to that new ways of working and the workplace itself. So we need to be mindful and take stock of the different ways that we have of working and the different ways of coping with change. Introducing routine or maintaining routine is one of the routes to helping you settle back into your new workplace, if that's where you're going, or working from home. Importantly, we also need to consider ourselves as business owners and managers. We need to stay up to date with the latest information, the changes and priorities, of course, but that can be tiring. So it's important that you build in time yourself for sleep and exercise and refresh and recharge yourself so that you can manage the additional stressors that you face in managing a workforce either remotely or as they return to work. So let's have a look at some of the support that businesses can provide to their staff. It's a matter of genuinely supporting a flexible working arrangements. So consult with them as individuals about their particular working environment and work from home. What are some of the things that impact them as individuals? So, obviously things like working in a small and you may work in a small, may live in a small home where you have either flatmates or spouses or whatever working in the same environment. That can make things very difficult. Add to that some school-aged children who not necessarily loving the schooling from home environment. So consult on what's the best way to work with them, and you look at flexible options around things like starting early, finishing late, or those different things, helping them deliver the outcomes you're after, but not necessarily measured by the hours that they sit behind their screen. Also, different people affected by different types of work and that stresses them. So discuss with them what it is that particularly stresses them in the work from home environment, and have a look at ways that you can reassign their duties or ways that other people can take on some of those responsibilities that are particularly stressing for them. We spoke about communication earlier, so regular communication is crucial. Both as one-to-one and as a team. I won't dwell on that too much, as we went through that in the previous presentation as well. The other thing that you can do is make sure that your workers have the contact details at EAP, employee assistance programs, if you have one in place, or there's plenty of resources out there available. And following on from today's event, I'll circulate some of those resources that people can use. So how can we encourage our team to stay connected? Well, positive inclusive culture doesn't start and finish at the office door. It can move over into the household, and you can maintain that from afar. So regular phone and video catch-ups for the team. And also, there's a lot of activities out there that can bring the team together. Some online events, trivia, although have heard lots of reports of people scoring 100 out of 100 on impossible questions because they have access to their mobile phone. Maybe all part of the game. Cocktail parties are great. People can make up cocktails at home to a predefined list and engage around that. One of my favorites that I've been actively working on with some of my clients is virtual lockdown rooms. So if you imagine the escape rooms that in the physical environment, there are virtual options around that as well. One of my clients ran one on a Friday, 2 weeks ago now, but they're still talking about it, and the engagement that came with that was fantastic. Playlists, assign someone as the DJ of the day, and put up some playlists on Spotify. It all helps with that engagement and allows them to stay connected. And home tours. People might want to see the home environment that they're working from and share that with their teams. I'm just going to move on to how you can be proactive around your employees and mental health. Recognizing the signs that someone is struggling, be aware of the behaviours and then communicate with those people. We all need support from time to time, and that advice is usually welcome. The stigma of mental health is starting to fade away. Fortunately, I think that's a great thing that's happened. Not just in COVID, but it's a trend in just in the general community. So people are willing to talk about issues they may be having around mental health. So educating your staff on ways to stay mentally healthy, and what they can, where they can go to if they need some support. There's, as said earlier, there's resources there to help you manage the the risks of working from home and the risks that people are going to face. They come back into the workplace, which I know that Annette's going to speak on shortly. So if you see a worker that is struggling, reach out and offer them the assistance that you can. So yeah, as I said in the opening, things have changed. The future of work is upon us now, much more quickly than we expected. People are working remotely, and that's having its positives and its negatives. So keep in contact with your staff, communicate with them well, and recognise when some of them are facing challenges. Thanks very much for your time. I hope you found that interesting and informative.
Well done, Brad. That's great. Looking forward to the Q&A on that as well. Now, our final speaker is Annette Dixon, who is the Director of End-to-End Business Solutions, who'll share some insights on returning to work with the COVID rollout or post-COVID. So Annette is a human resources professional qualified at Deakin University with 17 years of human resources management experience. Annette has built and transitioned businesses through effective human resource strategies using her strategic and operational human resources management skills. She has been a line manager and looked after compliance and regulatory issues for business. Annette has been with Coraggio for almost 9 years. Thank you, Annette. Over to you.
So thank you all for having me this afternoon. So the first thing I just want to open with is ignore all the media hype out there and deal with COVID-19 as you would deal with any other risk to your business. And the reasons for that, COVID will be around for a long time. And as business owners, you are obliged to ensure the health and wellness. So we've already dealt with Alpha, we're dealing with Delta. MU is currently in South America and in 42 countries around the world. The C.1.2 strain that's coming out of South Africa is there. The moment we open the international borders, those strains will also hit Australia. So we have to live with this. The other part I would say is there is no one size fits all when you're bringing back your staff or working with staff into COVID-19. It's a tailored approach, and consultation with your staff is key. And I know Brad and Sylvia have mentioned this, but that is actually the key to manage the whole COVID-19 and workplace strategy. So what do the regulators say? They say most workplaces are covered by an award or enterprise agreement, and every one of those awards and enterprise agreements have an obligation on the employer to consult when they're putting in major workplace changes, which includes vaccinating or vaccinations for COVID-19. They also say that it is going to continue rolling out. Employers and employees are encouraged to work together to find a solution to suit their needs. And the regulators of health and safety and the overarching also say you need to consult. So this is the common theme from all the regulators: consult with your people, and that for whatever you're going to do. So that's the regulators. To comply with health and safety, you must continue to do what you've been doing to stop the spread of COVID in your workplace: physical distancing, hygiene, those regular bits and pieces. Maintenance, using personal protective equipment, continuing to make sure your workers don't attend work if they're unwell. You may also have to comply with any public health order in your state. It depends on the state that you're in. And none of this is new. We have been doing this as business owners for years in managing our risks, and you need to do a risk assessment on your business just for COVID-19. It's straightforward as that. Okay, so some of the strategies, and there are many, and coming it back, but some of the things that we know is you maintain your social distancing, implementing hygiene practices. Now, an office is completely different to a work site potentially. So, you know, a construction site, what have they got in place? You need to tailor it. You might have to delineate areas so there's not the contagion going through. You may have to separate your people into groups, or different days of the week, flexibility. A lot of employees like the idea of 3 days a week. But if you're, back to Brad's point, a brickie on a site, well, how do they manage their way? They have to make sure they're safe. And, you know, there could be a delineation on what parts, what site office they go into and things like that to make sure it doesn't go through the workplace. You obviously got to manage your 4 square metre rule, complete a COVID safe check. Every business now needs to have a COVID safe plan, and also the QR codes with Service New South Wales. The other states are following that as well. And then there's also what I call building a quarantine, and having a strong team culture is the key to managing those risks within your workplace. So that's that communication, making sure that you're talking to your people. How can we do this better? Is there anything we've missed? What's our internal culture? So building that culture with our team to ensure that we're all got each other's backs when we're out there in the workplace. The quarantine is also includes that, you know, you expand, the team just reminds each other, there's respecting everybody's fears of uncertainty around what your staff are facing, and having individual conversations with those staff is very important. The more you understand why the employees may be scared, whether that's in a vaccination, whether that's contracting the virus, the more you will be able to manage those issues. So it's very important to have individual discussions with people when you're wanting them to come back into the workplace. And so in closing is really, as I said, risk assessments are the key. Consultation is the key with your staff. You build a really good team culture and you will find that people will want to come to work and deal with COVID-19 just in a risk management. The following websites, the regulators have these out there, and it's got all of it there on how to deal with COVID-19 in a safe way. So that's my thing this afternoon. So thank you for listening.
That was amazing, Sylvia. You didn't even need the timer.
I didn't.
Well done. All right. So what I'd love to do is open up the floor to Q&A. So who has a question for one of our presenters? Just feel free to go ahead and take yourself off mute and ask the question. Or would somebody like me to go first?
Yeah, I've got a question for Sylvia. Sylvia, is that something you can circulate to members as to what those success reports look like? Would you have samples of that? I'm sure our members would love to see what that looks like.
I do, yes, most definitely. I call them, instead of sales reports, they're success reports, and it highlights all the fabulous things that staff have achieved that week. So I think that changes the mindset around KPIs. It's not about KPIs, it's about the activity that you do today that helps us achieve the outcome we want tomorrow. And people are quite proud of what they do each day at work, and this helps them highlight what they've actually done.
Brilliant.
So, yeah, happy to share that.
Thank you.
I think that would be a brilliant idea. I think we all can use a little bit more of that type of stuff in our day-to-day. Who else has a question? All right, I had one a little bit. Sylvia, I might get you to field this one, but it also could fall to one of the others as well. If somebody could mute Pat. Thanks. With regards to, like, what I really find with working from home is that at the best of times for high achievers, like the lines between work and life were already blurred, but in lockdown, they are, it's like you've got, glaucoma. They are completely blurred. So what are some of the things that you actually can recommend to kind of, to build that routine? Because if that's what we need, what are some quick tips?
Yeah, you're right. Routine is difficult, and you're right. One day is blurring into the next. I try and segment my time so that I start off in the morning with time for me, because I know that for the rest of the day, I'm going to be giving to everyone else, including my son now, who is 10 and needs help with home learning. So I have an hour to myself where I can just read a paper, have a coffee, have some quiet time, and then prepare for the day. And I spend certain times with Jack during his school learning, but then I might block out 2 hours at a time where I just focus on work, and try and diarise time for fitness, even a walk at lunchtime. Being able to make sure you have lunch, that you're eating well each day as well, and make time for the things that you enjoy doing, such as calling friends, your family, connecting over the phone or via Zoom, and organising the week ahead. So maybe some social events on the weekend. It could be Zoom drinks. It could be a trivia night. Anything that helps you switch off and de-stress after being at work in four walls, basically, all day long.
All great tips. Thank you for that.
Sorry.
If I could just add to that as well, I think they're all wonderful ideas that Sylvia's put up. It's also having a clear end time for you and your workers. And so that's a start time and an end time, so that you can, draw a line and not have those blurred edges between work and home. We've got a strict end time, although I do sometimes break it. Strict end time here, that between 6 and 7 o'clock, that's tools downtime. And that should be extended to your staff as well.
Yeah. That's
And
right.
I think that's really easy in a traditional corporate environment or an organization that might have your standard work hours. But I think in terms of some of the people listening or who will listen to this, or people that we know, if you are, either in a senior position or working for yourself or in a small business, it's not that particular hard finish for tools down. Or and I'm gonna take one for the women on the call. Like, you might finish your day job, but then you got to go into mom duty and fix dinner. So it's kind of like you go from one job to the next job, and that's kind of like, I get, at times I am eternally grateful for calling up the local restaurant and getting some takeaway. But it is, I do find lockdown to be particularly particularly tiring, because you just kind of always seem to be on the go. But I did love some of the tips that both of you shared. And Brad, I am going to have to do, I'm going to have to look up the virtual lockdown room, because that sounds like fun and a great thing to do with my team. But also the Spotify playlist, that's a whole nother way of tormenting your colleagues, like getting out the old Steely Dan tunes and all of that, and putting them on the playlist for the millennials. They'll love that.
I didn't suggest it as a torture for staff or as a performance development, but yeah.
It's a culture thing. All right, what other questions did people have?
Wendy, it's Blythe Williams here. Could I just also add what we've been doing with our staff and also with a few of our clients is that you really nailed your own question in terms of routine. The routine is very important. And when it comes to a large amount of Zoom, that there is a time to go and refresh. So to leave the time apart when you've got, say, 5 or 6 Zooms a day, where they can go and clear their head. It might be a walk around the backyard or into the kitchen to make a cup of tea. And the other thing that we have been promoting pretty heavily, both internally and externally, is that if you're then going to go and use your social media or Zoom for social communication, because you're locked away at home, to do that in a completely different environment to what you normally work, so that you've got that separation between work and social. So, we've been finding that that's probably been helping our guys, but particularly about that Zoom refresh, particularly if you're in those back to back. So that I'd just like to add that in, if you wouldn't mind.
It's brilliant, Blair. It's fantastic. And it's a subtle change, isn't it? But it makes all the difference in the headspace, doesn't it?
Very much so.
Does anybody else have anything to share, like Bly, some things that have been working well for you? Come on, I know you guys want to get to pina colada time, and I promise you that will be rapidly approaching.
I think where's Jessica? She's been hiring a lot of people at Coraggio in the last week. I think and we've been hiring them across 3 states. So I think, Jess, you could certainly share some stories there.
Mm.
Yeah, happy to. Okay, so I will say one thing, just a statement to all 3 of your presentations. So from my perspective, I am absolutely loving working from home. I'm loving all of the Zoom's interactions. I'm loving the environment that I'm in, my workstation, the timings that I'm working to, and just my mental health is actually better than it's ever been at this point in time. So please don't think that all of your employees are not doing well, because there's a lot of employees out there that are succeeding and excelling in this environment. So I've just onboarded another 6 people this week, and team's grown to 11 additional people over the last few months, and all through obviously online onboarding and online interviews and things like that. I do try to do all of my interviews via Zoom or Teams so that I can see them face to face, because I think that's still important. And look, when you're doing training and online onboarding, it's definitely a case of, as you were saying before, don't do like a 3-hour session, because people are going to be overloaded. Bring it back to 45-minute sections, have those 15-minute breaks through it, and also, as just to reiterate what you were saying as well, just around, I guess, that check-in and being available if they do have questions, and having, I guess, those weekly meetings. Like, you don't want to micromanage, but just those weekly meetings and catch-ups where there's that learning and peer-to-peer learning that can be done. So yeah, that's it for me.
It's so true. Thank you for that, Jessica. And I too actually hired somebody. She started on the first Monday of lockdown. So I had 2 days face to face, and then when it went hard lockdown from that Wednesday, yeah, she's been doing her job from home, and it's been those every day at 3 o'clock we'll hop on a Zoom call and have that conversation about how things are going and all of that. But most of all, I make sure that she has those other points of contact with other people within the organization as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Brad, you mentioned a little bit about resiliency, and I'm a massive fan, but what are your kind of top 3 tips for fostering resiliency or helping people build resiliency remotely?
Yeah.
You don't have to be 3, maybe you've got 12, but over to you.
I'll try and narrow it down to 3. I think part of resilience, building resiliency, is that allowing people or letting people know that it is okay not to be perfect all the time. That if they do fail, that they're not going to be chastised. They're going to be encouraged and taught how to how to get the skills to ensure that doesn't happen next time. So yeah, that's number 1. Number 2 is to it's back to this communication thing. If people are feeling flat, and Jessica, I did appreciate what you said. We're focused on the negative today. There's certainly some positives from working from home. But by communicating with people, if they do fall flat, or if they do start to be impacted by being alone or working from home, that they've got people that they can talk to, and that helps them pick themselves back up, but also have the confidence that they can indeed pick themselves up. I'm looking for number 3. I think
Spotify list.
Spotify list, fantastic. Well done. Thank you for saving me. Or lockdowns. I can share the link to the lockdowns for anyone that likes it.
Yeah, do that. I think that's really it. If I think about really, the common threads that we've heard today is really around communication, isn't it? And also that none of
Absolutely.
us individually have all of the answers. And, I think we could all learn from one another, leverage from one another. And I did have a question for Annette as well. So you gave so many great tips on terms of how to kind of get a COVID safe workplace and all of that. But what are some of the common pitfalls that you find, organizations falling into, where maybe that they think that they're ready, but they actually overlooked, or just the, you know, maybe just not wanting to progress or embrace some of the new world order?
Look, what I see across organisations is, well, was potentially complacency. I think we handled Alpha so well, we were extremely complacent out there. And so initially there was that scaredness and everyone did all the right things. And then over time, we just became complacent and stopped doing that. And the key, I believe, is to not have complacency, to, you know, change things around, whether it's the Spotify playlist or something. Just keep your people engaged, keep the communication going, and reminding people gently, whether it's through a fun way or whatever it is, to stay safe and to just have each other's backs. You know, and now we're all seeing everybody rush off to get vaccinated, because, you know, suddenly in Sydney we were facing with these huge lifts of Delta cases, because we had that risk in our face, whereas before we were all cruisy. Queensland and WA are still cruisy because they haven't had the hit yet, but they will have the hit, just like everybody else. So that's what it's all about.
Yeah, you know, and absolutely. And I think I loved your opening phrase. What was your opening line again? Get used to COVID because it's here to stay. Was that what it was?
That's it. And ignore the media hype.
Yeah, yeah. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. And I think that, you know, it's just going to have a different, you know, as COVID kind of changes every year, we need to make sure that we are, you know, that we change with it and aren't complacent. And if I think about my brother who wound up spending 33 days in hospital, almost half of which on a ventilator, courtesy of Delta. Wow. You know, it's, you know, you just can't take these things for granted. You actually need to be on top of it. So I did see a question come through on the chat box. Hold on a second as I multitask. Renee has got a great question. Any hot tips for sole trader or practitioners? Hot tips with regards to how to be COVID safe. Renee, was there a particular category for that? Did you want to ask? Thank you. You ask your question.
No, just generally, you know, just keeping sane. You don't have a lot of people to talk to. If it is, it's your kids, and they're usually hungry. So obviously building a support network is part of that, but just from the HR side of things perspective.
Who'd like to field that?
Well, I think we touched on some of it earlier when you're talking about taking time out and making sure that you're looking after yourself. So we spoke about it in terms of a manager managing their people, but, you know, manage yourself, manage the time that you spend working on the business. If you're an extrovert, get on lots of Zoom calls, but find an outlet that works for you. Make sure you do maintain your exercise regime. And just, take time for yourself and look after your own mental health.
Renee, there are lots of associations out there as well. Like Brad was saying, keeping yourself active is important, but there might be some industry specific groups that you can also keep in regular contact with that might just help make your journey a little less isolated.
Right. Anybody else feeling what Renee was feeling? Any points or tips from your own experience to help her? Nothing?
I have a question as opposed to a tip, Wendy. This comes from a couple of conversations I've had with some of our members and just business owners I know who work in the trades, where they've said they are unsure as to what to do around the vaccinations. Sylvia, I think you touched on this last week actually, where they're not sure whether to mandate it, and then, you know, risk pushback from staff or potential lawsuits in future for, you know, discrimination if they stop hiring or let people go if they refuse to vaccinate. But then if they don't mandate that and they end up taking COVID to site, you know, like, you know, a huge government site, then what happens?
I've got quite a few tradies in my client base, and that's a common question that's coming from them. Can I tell people can I mandate vaccination? And look, you know, there's 4 tiers of workers that and different ways they're treated from a mandated point of view. I've been actively encouraging my my clients to have a conversation with their workers and let them know that clients, going to client site, as in going to homes and things like that that tradies do, that a lot of those people are suggesting that they don't want unvaccinated people in the home. If those tradies are dealing with aged care or hospitals or institutions of that ilk, then vaccination is mandated by the government. You can suggest very strongly, which is mandate with a little m, that people are vaccinated, that tradies and staff are vaccinated. The real issue comes about if you take a consequence of their refusal to vaccinate, and that's where you can start to get in trouble. So, if you suggested that you're going to terminate someone or threaten them or anything like that, then that becomes a consequence of their position of not wanting to vaccinate. So you just need to be careful how you do that, and have it as a conversation rather than sending out a letter mandating everyone to do it. There's ways to encourage people without necessarily assigning consequences to that, and from those consequences could come action against you as an employer.
Right. And I think it's, it'd be interesting to see. I think, there are lots of organizations that have, I guess, the official encouragement program around getting the vaccine. And I think that's okay. It's in so many ways, it's uncharted territory. And, heaven forbid, if somebody knowingly goes into a workplace COVID positive and spreads it to a fellow colleague, and that person subsequently dies, are there legal ramifications for the employer? These are things that lawyers are having to think about, and the courts will ultimately have to decide. But it's certainly uncharted territories in a lot of spaces. And I think just encouragement and common sense. And if people have questions, just ensure that they actually speak to their own personal GP or physician.